Okay. Hello, it is noon on Friday, and you are listening to Ferguson, USA Hot Talk Radio. This is Hope, Help, and Healing with Kim Milberg. I'm Kim Milberg, and today our show is not going to be about the coronavirus. It is instead staying safe when you're out in public. And I don't know about all of you, but I need a break from the coronavirus information, so hopefully this will be a nice and needed break. The reason why we're doing this show is back in February, at the end of February, we all heard about a man who walked into the Maryland Heights Community Center and shot and killed his supervisor on duty, Maria Lucas. After shooting her, he was seen pacing back and forth in the lobby, the gun still in his hand, and there was people around him that seemed totally unaware that he still had a gun in his hand. And I saw that, and it upset me, it bothered me, and I was thinking I would love for my listeners to have some information so they're never put in the position where they're in a situation where they're found unaware. Today's show is going to be in honor of Maria and her dad, Virgil. Her dad, Virgil, sadly died about 5 days after she was killed. So with me today are Alex and Keith from Peacemaker Defense Group. Peacemaker Defense Group is an organization that is headquartered in St. Louis. It has multiple locations in Missouri, as well as locations in Florida, Georgia, and California. They offer personal security services such as security consulting, security guards, specially trained canine dogs, teaching for police officers and police departments, and something that I think everybody's interested in, active shooter training for the civilian or the civilian business. Their web address is peacemakerdefensegroup.com, and you can find them there, and you can find out more information too. So I'd like to take a minute to introduce our guests. This is Alex, and Alex is a former Marine with 4 years in a MAP platoon. He did deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yes.
And in 2010, after his service, and thank you for your service, he did close protection security for important people and movie stars and media in Hollywood. After that, he went back to Afghanistan and worked as part of the embassy liaison. Thank you. I practiced on that one and I still goofed it up. Doing personal security for various diplomats. Alex is currently the vice president of Peacemaker Defense Group. And next to him is Keith. Keith is a former law enforcement officer, and I'm condensing this because it would take me the whole half hour otherwise. He's worked for quite a few of the various alphabet agencies within the United States government. He's also worked teaching constitutional law to police officers. He's been a firearms instructor and a multi-assault counterterrorism action capabilities instructor. That's impressive.
Even I'm impressed. That's pretty good.
He now specializes in continuing education for law enforcement with the goal of implementing a new approach in the way to manage police officers or police. Mm-hmm. So thank you guys for coming today. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. And I know you had to drive a long way, so thank you. So what I was thinking we could do is I'll throw out different scenarios for you, and you guys tell me how to handle them. But first of all, for starters, is there anything kind of a bridge that people can do when they're out in public to kind of the number one thing they can do to protect themselves? Should they be looking at something, looking for something? Should they be looking at hands or eyes or feet or what?
When you're out in public, one of the first and most prominent things that you can do is something called situational awareness. And situational awareness is when you lack that, that's what predators, which are criminals, that's what they key in on. And they notice, because they're good at what they do, because they're predators, they notice who the person is on that parking lot between 10 people who has the least situational awareness. Okay. And it's based on your body posture, the way you walk, the way you have things in your hands. If you're walking towards your car with your keys in your hand, that's completely different than somebody walking towards their car with nothing in their hands.
Okay, I see a lot of moms pushing with their kids in the cart, and they're on the phone.
Yeah.
So that's not a good thing for situation.
That's a terrible thing, because first of all, they have an extended liability, the child.
Okay.
So that changes things drastically. The second thing is not paying attention to what's around you jeopardizes the safety of the person and their child.
Okay. All right. So somebody, a predator would be looking for somebody who's trying to do 3 things at once and not paying attention to what's around them.
Sure, and that's just the animal kingdom per se. The lion doesn't chase the fastest, strongest gazelle. It chases the one that's limping.
Okay.
And that's just the way that nature is. And most criminals have become very good at scoping the situation out and assessing the level of the person. How much of a fight will they put up? How easy will they be able to identify me? What things are they doing that allows me to get away with this criminal act? And that's what they do. They actually have a process of selecting their victims. Spent years and years interviewing victims and years interviewing suspects. And they all say basically the same thing, that I picked that person because I would always ask, why did you select that person? And they'll tell you.
Wow. What about an elderly couple walking through like a Walmart parking lot or a Lowe's parking lot?
Elderly people present a whole new system of challenges because they actually do need to go out and do things. But the fact of the matter is they need to be more cognizant. They need to ask attendants to walk them to their car. Those are some of the things that if you go to Walmart and you ask for somebody to escort you to your car, they're going to do it because they're very customer orientated. So that's some of the things that elderly people do because they really are not going to put up a serious and significant fight in most cases.
Okay. All right. So somebody too that is just an average citizen but maybe has been traumatized, they've got some PTSD, they can go to the service counter and say, I'd really like somebody to walk into my car. Okay, all right, that's good to know. That's one thing I really did not know. I had an incident Monday, and here I'm preparing for this show, and I was at a local bedding store, and I was walking through the parking lot, and all of a sudden I hear somebody behind me screaming, a lady screaming at the top of her lungs, and I immediately looked to check to see if she was okay, and either she was in a really big fight with her husband, or she was a little unhinged. In that situation, I was close enough to my car that I got in my car and locked the door. I didn't feel threatened, but I realized, here I'm going to do this show, and I wasn't sure what to do. I thought, I haven't had the show yet. I don't know what to do. So what are some mindsets to have in a situation like that?
The first thing you want to find out is, what are they screaming about? Are they screaming, he's got a gun? Are they screaming, get out of my face? Stop attacking me, let go of me. The first part of the intel is to find out what they're screaming. Now, you can do that and still make it to your car safely. The second thing is, if you can't find out what they're screaming about, it sounds like they're in peril, get in your car and call the police.
Okay.
And don't call the police and drive off expecting that to be the end of the story.
Oh, okay.
You're far enough distance away where you can watch them and not put yourself in jeopardy. You should stay on the line with the dispatcher so the dispatcher can continue to give the police officers that information. We call it real-time intel as to what's going on, because if the police department has a 5-minute, 7-minute response time, a lot can happen in that period of time, and it would be advantageous to the law enforcement professionals to get that updated information as it's going on. And if you feel threatened, the person starts to focus on you, just drive further away. But still keep an eye on it until you know that something's going, that the police are going to be there.
Okay, all right. I would think, too, driving a little ways away and stopping could be a deterrent if there was something going on or about to go on because they realized they were being watched.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It also creates distance from you and the issue as well,
Right.
giving you a little bit of safety from that event that could take place, or giving you the distance to give you the enough reaction time to get out of Dodge if need be, kind of thing.
Okay, all right. All right, say I'm at a store.
Okay.
And I'm in an aisle, and I'm minding my own business, looking at, whatever, boxes of cereal. And somebody comes into that same aisle, and I suddenly get the willies. I don't feel comfortable. they're like looking at me kind of weird and I'm starting to feel uncomfortable. What do I need to do? Just walk away? And what if they follow me? Okay. I heard, I was telling somebody about this show, and they said one of the things that they do when they get in a situation like that is they'll turn and look at the person kind of almost in a confrontational way. So I thought, I would think you would just kind of pull in and almost ignore them. What's the better thing to do?
Both of those options are good, but you got to think about something. You're in an aisle, and there's two people in the aisle. You know you're there. They know you're there. Mm-hmm. The first thing to do is make an eye contact. Eye contact is always a good deal because in most times, predators, when you don't make eye contact, they see that as an invitation that you're weaker than they thought you were. Ah. So you make eye contact and then just leave that aisle. Go to an aisle or the front counter where there are people around, because here's what happens. Your body is naturally programmed to utilize something called fight or flight.
Right.
And it will cause the hair on the back of your neck to stand up. It'll cause your muscles to twitch. You'll start shaking. And what I've asked a lot of victims when I interview them is, how did you feel right before it happened? And almost always they will say, I felt sick to my stomach. I felt like there was some electric going up my back. I felt something. And I ask them, well, why didn't you do something different at that period of time? And they say, I just didn't want to look like I was being silly. There's a reason why you get those feelings. Mm-hmm. And that's your body telling you that something's unnatural, something's wrong, and you should probably escape that. When people ignore that and they get victimized, then they beat themselves up for years to come on why they didn't abide by that. So I tell people, if you get that feeling, whatever you're doing, change it completely. If you're walking south, change and walk north. You have to do something completely different than what you're doing because the path that you're on is already predicted by the predator. Mm-hmm. And they're going to run an interceptor on you. So when you do something completely opposite, now that puts them behind the 8 ball on reactionary rates and things of that nature. So looking them in the eye is always a good opportunity to let them know that you can identify them at some point later on if they try to perpetrate a crime. Mm-hmm. That's the first and most important thing. The second thing is just remove yourself from that situation immediately. No hesitation. No, I feel silly. I really want to get that box of cereal, but don't get that box of cereal, because if you walk out of that aisle, you go up front, you can go back and get that box of cereal. It's still going to be there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I was in a situation, as you were talking, it reminded me of this. I was in a situation years ago where I used to walk every morning, and we moved to an area that was different than where we had lived before. I wasn't real familiar with it. And I noticed that I had walked about a block and there was a car tailing me. And so for some reason, I'm usually kind of a big chicken, but it made me mad. And I thought, okay, what do I need to do? And I saw a house with the front light on. And, it was like 7 o'clock in the morning. And I just walked up the stairs like it was my house, and I pretended to get out my keys and like I was unlocking the door. And they drove on, and I thought, well, now they think they know where I live, which isn't good. But they drove on, which is good. Then I was 3/4 of a mile from the house and realized, oh no, now what do I do? But in a situation where somebody's out walking and they feel like there's somebody following them, maybe somebody a half a block away, how can you handle that?
Move faster. What you did was perfect. You see somebody in their driveway, walk up, start talking to them, and let them know that this car is following you. Okay. Always look at the plate. What I've seen people do here recently is they take their phone out and take a picture of the vehicle.
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Because there are apps now where you can send that picture immediately to somebody else. Okay. And they'll take a picture of the vehicle, and the vehicle will see that they took the picture of it, and now they're thinking, I can be identified, because it's not like the old days where you take a picture and it's on your phone. They get you and the phone. Nowadays, you can actually send that picture instantaneously to another person, and they're aware of these technology advances. So those are some other options you might want to choose. But what you did was perfect.
Okay.
Trust your instincts.
You have...
that's really, to me, that's a big part of it. Just trust that instinct, that spiny feeling that goes up your back, or that feeling that make you run a little bit faster kind of thing. Trust it. Okay. It's there for a reason.
All right. You have 50,000 brain cells in your heart, and literally thousands, if not millions, of brain cells in your gut. So when you have a gut feeling about something, or I felt in my heart I should do something, those are, we use those sentences inadvertently, but they're true. They're really true. And the gut and the heart are kind of a double checking system, double and triple checking system for the brain. So that's exactly right. Trust your gut, trust your heart. Okay, St. Louis just had the Mardi Gras parade and party and everything downtown. Okay, so for a 22-year-old who went down to Mardi Gras, what's the mindset that they should have when they're in a group like that? How can they stay safe aside from not going?
That's always a step.
That's always.
I think crowds present a whole nother sort of problem for you. Historically, we would believe that there's strength in numbers and crowds would be a safe place, but bystander apathy has begun to create a lot of problems for us because we believe that somebody else is going to stop something bad that happens. And every time we see a case where some lady was sexually assaulted multiple times by multiple people and other people watch and they videotaped it, nobody stepped in to do something, we have to think that society has changed a little bit. When we were kids, well, I'm pretty old. When we were kids, you couldn't do something wrong in the neighborhood without one of the neighbors ratting you out and grabbing you by your shirt and taking you home to say your son was doing X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Well, those things have sort of kind of abandoned us, and it's because we have our whole society is changing a little bit. If you look at countries where they have a collaborative, like some of the countries like China, where their whole sense of value is on the group and not the individual. And you look at us where individually we're always trying to better ourselves. We lose a little bit of that every 10 years as we start progressing to be so self-contained about what we can accomplish and what we can do. So vicariously through all of that, what winds up happening is bystander apathy, where people believe that it's a group of 40 people, surely somebody's going to do something. So when you're out in a crowd now, it's different from when we were young, where if a guy slapped a woman in a crowd back in the old days, every guy in that crowd would jump that guy. Well, it's not so prevalent now. So when you're in the crowd, especially if you're young and you're down at an event like Mardi Gras, the first thing is don't take for granted that somebody will stop something if something happens.
Okay.
The second thing is make sure that you are fully aware of what the state law says about protecting yourself or another. And the state law specifically says that you have a right to protect yourself. It also says that you have a right to protect somebody else with the same provocation that you would have to protect yourself. So if Alex and I were out doing something and I perceive somebody trying to assault him, by state statute, I can protect him.
Okay, and I think that's something that people don't know. As a nurse back in the 80s, I saw a lot of people not stepping in to help, including medical professionals, because they didn't want to risk getting sued.
Right.
And they knew that, that they didn't have the funds to hire a lawyer and fight it. So they're like, you know what, I'm just going to stand here and not do anything. And then some of the personal security type classes back then, few and far between, but they would tell, don't get involved, call the police. Well, a 6-minute response time or a 10-minute response time, and something's already happened.
A lot of terrible things can happen in a short period of time.
Right.
You're absolutely right.
Okay, so lately I'm hearing about more and more carjackings. What's the mindset, because you seem to have an understanding of the mindset of the perpetrator as well as the victim, which is amazing. I'm really glad you both are here today. What's the mindset of the perpetrator for carjacking, and what can we do, whether it's in a gas station, in our driveway, or at a stoplight? What can we do to protect ourselves from carjacking?
They're all different attitudes, different things. If you're in your driveway and you warm your car up with your keys in it, or you warm your car up and you go out to your car, you're telegraphing to everybody that I'm going to be out here in a second getting in that car. So they can sit by and wait for you to come out, and then they can get your car. If you're at a gas station, you have no defense at a gas station. You're going to pump gas. They know you're pumping the gas, and they can come up at any period of time, usually after you're done, and take your car. My suggestion to people is don't resist, just give them the car.
Right.
Just give them the car, because when you resist, you open yourself up to a lot of physical assault.
Mm-hmm.
And I suggest that you just give them the car. Now, if you're driving down the street, and once again, you see somebody down the street and it just doesn't look right, trust in your gut. Learn how to do U-turns really fast.
Okay. All right. So know your car's turn radius.
Yeah, know your car. If you know that your car can turn around in 4 lanes real easy, that's fine. If you know that it can't, then you got to be really good at doing reverse. Because as Alexander said, there's an old saying in law enforcement: time, distance, and cover. If you increase the distance between you and that threat, you win every time.
Okay.
And I don't care how fast you can back up. If you can back up at 10 miles an hour, that person that was already 100 yards back is not going to catch you.
Okay.
And if you can back up to a point where you can find a street or something where you can take a U-turn and turn around, then that's what you need to do. But people aren't really cognizant of the abilities of their vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And they really should be.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I pull up to a red light and there's somebody and they start walking towards my car and there's no cross traffic, I'm running that red light. Because the worst thing that can happen is the policeman can stop me and say, "You ran that red light." I say, "Yeah, did you see that guy?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and if he wants to give me a ticket, I'm okay with that, because I trusted my gut and I got out of what we call that crisis motion, that crisis position right there. That's immediate, and you got to do it. Most police officers will understand. If you're in a neighborhood late at night and it's dark and you run a stop sign because you saw somebody that just made you hinky,
Mm-hmm.
most police officers will be like, "Yeah, I probably would have gone through it too."
Okay.
So don't be so regimented that you think you have to abide by every rule if your safety's in jeopardy.
Okay. Do you know, in the St. Louis area, St. Charles area, Lincoln County, are there any advanced driving courses available anywhere?
Not that I'm aware of.
I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
Not that, but that's a great idea. I'm glad you brought that up, because we probably
We could add that to the list. But there's nothing wrong with going to a parking lot, a Walmart parking lot, or some parking lot along those lines, and just taking your car and turning the wheel and just see how sharp it can turn or something. I'm not saying go do donuts in the middle of the night or something like that.
Well, I would do the donuts.
I would do.
I would do the donut.
That's how I learned to drive in the snow, is an
Yeah.
empty parking lot and floor it and hit the brakes. Yeah, a friend of mine did that, and he hit the light, but
See, that would be
wrong
a
parking lot.
That's
Wrong
Big
parking
problem.
lot.
Yeah. Okay. If anybody's been listening to the news, they heard in St. Charles, Lake St. Louis, a couple days ago, there was a shooting at the Walmart. A employee and a patron got into an argument. The patron pulled out, I'm hoping it was a pistol, and shot up into the air. How do you handle a situation like that besides run and take cover? Which I guess that's probably the smartest thing to do.
Run and take cover.
Yeah.
Run and take cover.
But what? Oh, and you hit on it a little bit. If you see something happen to somebody else, best thing to do first is make sure that you're safe.
Right.
Call 911. And I didn't know that about staying on the line. That's because things can change. We were talking earlier that the perpetrator can leave. And so things can change. So you're basically the eyes and ears for the police, until they get there. I'm thinking in a bar, for example, you see somebody put something in somebody's drink, or you think you saw it, because when you're in a situation like that, you're like, did I just see what I thought I saw? And then you start questioning yourself. In a situation like that, how do you handle it?
It depends on who you are. If it's me, I'll walk up and say, "Why'd you do that?" Or I'll knock the drink over. Or I'll say something to the person, because you don't know what the mechanics are. But for the average person, maybe not that forward. But you should not, because it falls right back into the bystander apathy thing.
Okay.
And the difference between a bystander and an upstander is the upstander actually takes some action. And most times it doesn't matter what action you took, just as long as you took some action. And in an establishment like that, if you talk to the bartender, you say something, I'm going to tell you, they're going to be very proactive. Because the last thing they want is for somebody to get drugged, because most times when those situations happen, they don't take the person away. The sexual assault happens right there at that location. So the way it works is the person who drank it will get nauseous. They'll go to the bathroom, and then that person will follow them to the bathroom. That's normally how that occurs. So it's not like they're going to just walk out with the person and take them to some other location. So that's one of those situations where you need to at least let the bar staff know that you just witnessed that. Because if you're wrong, they just get a person another drink.
Okay. All right. What can people do to protect themselves from road rage? I'm seeing even more of that lately.
Sure.
Well, road rage is something that we've all experienced, and I found out recently tactics that I used before don't work anymore. I had a young lady that apparently was speeding just extremely fast coming down New Hallsbury. I move her in the left lane. I drive a big 1-ton dually. And I move her in the left lane, and I cut her off. Well, I cut her off because I never saw her because she was driving so fast. And she started flipping and screaming and cussing. And we both get to the intersection at the same time. I roll my window down and say, "Hey, look, I'm really sorry. I didn't see you." And she goes off with this big, long line of, cuss words and everything else. I said, "No, I really." And she said, "You made me drop all my stuff." I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Would you like me to just pull over and I'll help you pick that stuff up?" I said, "I'm so sorry for that." And she just kept screaming and yelling. Finally, I just told her, I said, "I'm so sorry that you're in such a bad mood today." I said, "I'm so sorry." I said, "Is there anything I can do to make it better?" I said, "We can go to McDonald's, I'll get you a shake." And she's like, "Well, no, I don't want a shake." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry you're angry." She says, I'm really not angry." And, so talking to people apparently is not working. And I used to do that. There would be, ways like, "Hey, sorry. I would suggest you just drive away."
Okay.
Drive away. And if they follow you, we had a lady, this was 20 years ago, had a lady drive right up to Schnucks and park her car right on the mats, right at the door. And she called us, obviously, and she parks right on the mats, and the car went away. We've had people pull into the police station lot. So I say find a very heavily traveled place, like a store or something like that. Drive up, drive right to the door, get out of your vehicle, lock it, and walk in. And most places, like restaurants that have bathrooms, tell the people at the location, "Hey, this guy's following me," because there have been cases where managers have taken people to a back office and secured them until the police got there. So find someplace that's occupied.
Okay.
But that's the same thing with situational awareness.
Right.
As you're driving down the street and there's knuckleheads behind you, start looking for places where it's occupied and bunches of people.
Okay. What if somebody gets so aggressive that they start bumping the back of your car?
Then you just keep moving.
Okay.
Yeah, don't stop, because now it's going to be an assault, because they're already demonstrating that they can't control themselves. They're already committing a crime by running into your vehicle. You can't hit people with vehicles. You just can't do it. That's against the law.
Right.
And the likelihood that you can reason with them if you pull over and get out to check the damage is slim to none.
Okay.
That right there, sorry to interrupt. Is the one thing I want to emphasize. I'm not saying there's no need to be a hero or something like that, but at the same time, there's no reason to get into a confrontation or be the one to escalate the confrontation.
Right.
If somebody's hitting the back of your car or something like that, go ahead, dial 911, put it on speaker, put it on your lap, and just let them know what's going on. Still pay attention to the road, but do what you need to get out of that situation.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean slam on your brakes, jump out, and start screaming and yelling at that guy and run over to him. 'Cause who knows what's going through his head right now?
Right.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want to do is escalate this to the next level of whatever it could be.
All right. You talked about getting to the intersection at the same time. Make eye contact or avoid eye contact?
I'm a big fan of making eye contact so people know I can identify them. I'm a real big fan of making eye contact with people, because if he gets out of his car and you're at the intersection, thank goodness he got out of his car. Now you can drive on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, don't sit in your vehicle and let that person walk up to your vehicle. That's a big no-no. And keep your eyes on them, because if you don't make contact and you don't see them get out of their vehicle, now you're behind the 8 ball. Just make eye contact. If they're using all their profanity, everything else, just don't do it back, and just hope the light changes. If the light doesn't change and they get out of their vehicle, make sure cross traffic is okay and just drive off.
Okay.
Because now you got a head start because they got to run back to their vehicle and get in.
Right, right, yeah, and the only situation that would prevent that is if you've got a lot of cross traffic.
Sure.
So, at very least, lock your doors.
Lock your doors.
Okay.
Keep your windows up.
Okay, all right, and I guess too, you talked about using your phone. If they get out and get aggressive towards you, start walking towards your vehicle. If there's enough cross traffic that you can't accelerate and go forward, you can always start taking pictures.
Yep.
Okay.
This also, I will interject right here, even with cross traffic or if you're 4 cars in front of you kind of thing, one thing I think that people need to think about when they're driving, this is kind of hard for people to even to get in their head to have this mindset, but when you're driving and you do come to a stop, maybe just in your everyday life, leave a little bit of extra room there. Instead of stopping right next to someone's rear bumper, maybe just give it a couple more feet kind of there. So you have a little bit of movement room. And that might come to the point of somebody, I hate doing hypothetical, but we're already jumping down this road. But if somebody's approaching your vehicle, you really have nowhere to go, but you have that little bit of extra room and you see a firearm come out or something along those lines, at least you have enough room to move in some direction, to gas it and hope to do whatever you need to do. But having that mindset ahead of time, and I would hate for people to be afraid in their daily lives, and that's not what we want to do, but there's nothing wrong with having situational awareness or having the mindset of giving that little bit of extra room when you're stopping your vehicle, or I don't know, riding mainly on the far left side of the street or the far right side of the street, something along those lines.
Okay, so if you have to get out and the sidewalk's the only way,
It's
you
already
take
there.
the sidewalk.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I was thinking earlier, I asked you about the defensive driving because I'm thinking, okay, if I had to take the sidewalk or if I had to go over a curb to get out of an emergency situation, are my tires going to be okay?
Sure. Yeah,
Yep,
it'll be
just
fine.
do it. You're
Okay.
fine. Just do it.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And if they pop, keep going.
Okay.
Just go.
Yeah, because it's all about...
You can replace tires.
You can replace tires, exactly. Okay. So, my last question, is there anything cringeworthy that you see repetitively or most commonly that people are doing wrong that you would like to tell our listeners, hey, if you do this, you're going to keep yourself out of a lot of...
This.
Okay.
Just looking at your phone the whole time, not looking at what's going on, not looking at your surroundings, situational awareness, not having a clue what's going on around you, crossing the street and just looking at your phone with headphones in the whole time. I mean, something as simple as that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
And,
right.
and what you have to remember is society is always changing. We're always coming up with new, I mean, the criminal acts that they're perpetrating now, 38 years ago when I started, they weren't doing those things.
That's
You know,
the
they have
truth.
so many new avenues to victimize people that it just keeps coming and going. And you mentioned something earlier when we were talking about the shooting at Maryland Heights, how people were just standing around. Part of the problem is, and I will never tell you the problem without a solution, part of the problem is people are not acclimated to hostile situations. If you've been a police officer, you've been in the military, or you're a hunter and you hear guns go off, there's no mistaking the sound of a gun to a firecracker or a book falling off a shelf. And people don't perceive that as well as people who had training. And when you see people walk around when there's a shooter, in that particular case, you have to realize that that was not an active shooter. He had one target in mind, and the pacing that you saw was, what do I do now? What do I do now? And the people who were standing around, when you see something that you've never experienced before, you might have seen that horror movie 1,000 times. You know, in the commercial they say, let's hide in here with the chainsaws. And, you may have seen those commercials, but in real life, when something like that happens, you have to understand, not the average people don't understand that, because there are hundreds of times that we've had a critical situation happen and people are standing right there and you go to talk to them as witnesses and they will have completely different stories as to what happened, the sequence of events, who the person was, the race of the person, the gender of the person. And you can have 12 people in a room this size and 7 of them will have a completely different story because their perception at the point in time is their reality at that point in time. Now, what actually happened at the end, because I think if you talk to anybody that was in that situation and you showed them the video and you ask them, why were you doing that? They're like, I had no idea that had happened. You know, because their mindset isn't there. Now, how do you sharpen those abilities?
Right.
You sharpen those abilities by getting training. It's just training. It's just training. It's training, training, training. When active shooters do happen, the average is every 7 seconds a human being is losing a life in an active shooter situation. But think about the time it took those people to orientate in their head that something absolutely horrible had just happened right where they were standing.
Right.
And there's a lag time. Well, people who want to destroy as many lives as possible take advantage of that lag time. Mm-hmm. And in that case, if he wanted to shoot more people, he could have shot more people. But
Right.
that was not his desire.
Right.
And we're grateful that that wasn't his desire.
Mm-hmm.
But you saw the video. You see the people standing around. It's not because they're bad people. It's just because they're just not acclimated to that type of an environment. And it takes a second for you to really register. That just really happened. Mm-hmm. You look at some of these shootings where they're in bars and things like that, or clubs, and they thought it was part of the entertainment.
Right, and I've heard him say that before.
Yeah.
I'm the CEO and founder of Leave None Behind Ministries, and I do a lot of study on the brain. So I do a lot of teaching on the brain. And one of the things that I think is absolutely fascinating, especially if you go somewhere repetitively, like whether it be a Walmart or Target or your own home, you build up a neural network that tells you what that is. Mm-hmm. So then when something goes wrong, your eyes see it, but your brain doesn't see it. And it takes your brain and your eyes talking for quite a while for you to actually start building a neural network that accepts what you're seeing. And the perfect example of that was after the tornadoes in Joplin. There was a lady who was on the cruise when the tornado hit, and she came home and her entire neighborhood was leveled. She was walking around on top of the debris saying, "I don't believe this, I don't believe this." And it was on TV, and I learned so much from that because she literally could not, or she wasn't saying, "I don't believe it." She says, "I can't believe this." And that was literal, and I don't think she even realized it. Her brain could not accept, because her brain saw her house as still built, but her eyes were giving her a completely different piece of information. And it's fascinating, and it's done. God created our brain that way for a reason.
Sure.
But when something goes wrong, it takes a little while. So if you're ever in a situation, I'm talking to my listeners, if you're ever in a situation where something has gone wrong and you were very disappointed in the way you reacted, and you hear this too with soldiers who've been in combat. I knew better. I should have done X, Y, Z, and I just stood there. First of all, it's flight, fright, or freeze. Flight, fight, or freeze. You don't always do what you're trained. Sometimes you just totally freeze. And it may seem like you were frozen for 10 minutes. It may have only been 10 seconds. But if you've ever been disappointed in your response, it was because your brain was taking a while to readjust and receive that information and calculate that information and then come back out with an input of what you should do next.
Sure.
So it's a reason not to be hard on yourself. And that's something I try to tell a lot of combat veterans is don't be so hard on yourself. Yes, you trained, but your body literally could not do any better.
Right.
All right. Is there anything else you guys want to share?
No, I think you covered quite a bit of ground.
Okay.
Very good. Very
All
good
right.
questions.
Thank you. Well, if you guys don't mind, I'd like to close in prayer. I want to pray for you, and I want to pray for all of our first responders out there. Father God, we thank you for being present here today. We thank you for this great instruction. And Lord, I challenge everybody to be much more aware of their personal surroundings in this time right now with the coronavirus, and people are more stressed out. Help them to be aware of their personal surroundings and take responsibility, and to help those in need if they see somebody around them struggling or having a rough time, to be that person who stands up, stands out, and actually does something. And I pray for Keith and Alex, Lord, that you keep them and their families safe, and just within your protective care. We thank you for this day. We thank you for all the first responders and veterans who are listening. And Lord, we ask that you strengthen their life, their marriage, and their family. And it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. And it's been a great talk with Keith and Alex. And